You know, during the debate, and we've talked about this before, you know, like in the debate of 1070, which simply was a codification of current law. States have inherent police powers and have a constitutional duty to enforce the laws. They take an oath of office to uphold the laws of this land and defend the Constitution. One cannot ignore the damage. 12 Phoenix police officers murdered and maimed. Here's what's happened since we started enforcing our laws. We've had a dramatic decrease in crime, 3 times that of the national average. We have 50,000 fewer students in K-12. Provides for smaller classrooms, for better education, I would hope, as we get our educational system under control. And then, of course, you can't ignore the other costs that come with that. So,
thanks, Senator. Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis.
The federal government mandates that every child is educated in a K-12 environment. We follow the rule of law. We don't ask for their identification when they come in as to whether they're U.S. citizens or not. So we follow the law. We make sure that we educate those students. The real problem is that Arizona continues to be in the bottom tier in education. We have shown that we can teach all students, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their citizenship, if we will focus on working with the educational community, helping teachers have the tools they need to do the jobs that they're required to do.
Any follow-up?
Yeah, what about colleges and universities, state schools? Should we be charging out-of-state tuition to undocumented students?
Senator Pearce?
First of all, the citizens of Arizona, the taxpayers, the voters, made it very clear in 06 when they passed Proposition 300 by about 75%, and when they said no to that. I support the voters and the taxpayers of this state. It would give a leg up to those in the country illegally, to even citizens. If you're a citizen of this great country from another state and you come to Arizona, you pay out-of-state tuition. You know, so it's clearly a moral issue that must be done. Under federal law, it actually prohibits, you know, public benefits to those in this country illegally. So you have this dichotomy and really the hypocrisy as we continue to push these kind of things. I oppose the DREAM Act. I oppose the taxpayers subsidizing with taxpayer dollars students that are in this country illegally, you know, to get a higher education. I oppose that subsidy. In Arizona, we don't disallow them to go. We oppose the subsidy of the taxpayer to fund those students who are in the country illegally.
Thank you. We uphold the rule of law. The rule of law does not currently allow for out-of-state students to receive in-state tuition. However, we need to look at this issue along with the countless other issues in the immigration arena to come up with an immigration reform that will really work. We need to consider national security, securing our border, the rule of law, the effect on the economy of piecemeal legislation as opposed to legislation that looks at all of the issues, including what does this do to the separation of families. We need to consider the education, the health care, all the other issues as well to make sure.
Let's please not have Oscars.
Thank you. We need to make sure that we address this issue in a humane way that we can all be proud of and that we can all live with.
Okay, thank you. Folks, if we keep cheering, we're going to run short on time, so let's keep it moving. We'll move now to government relations and regulation. I guess we're back to Ms. Allhands.
During the last legislative session, the legislature adopted modest changes to the state's retirement system. The high cost of government seems to be a frequently discussed issue. What reforms do you believe are appropriate with respect to government employees?
And I think we're starting with Mr. Lewis this time.
Thank you. First off, we need to make sure that we keep the promises that we have made to our government employees. We cannot break a promise that they have received already. We must make sure that those pensions are fully funded. We must also make sure that we have retirements that we can afford. We can't continue to pay for retirements that we can't afford or try to promise this type of reform that we can't afford. I support the recently passed legislation that prevents double and triple dipping into the pension reform system. And as an elected official, I will not take the state's pension that they offer. I am a public servant. I don't see it as a career. I don't think I should take that pension.
Senator Pearce.
Yeah, Senate Bill 1609 was a good bill. We, again, We brought everybody to the table to decide. What happened is on the retirement systems, we had 4 of them in the state, then they became, again, they went from $5 billion of surplus to a $10 billion, perhaps even more, according to Wall Street Journal, deficit, liability. Huge issue. So either you had to fix them, you're right, or they destroyed themselves. You had to get back and have a look at the benefits and how they're dealt out. We did that, and we came up with a solution I think was good for everybody, that kept our promises relative to the Constitution. Those folks have a contract with the state of Arizona, yet made the proper changes in order to try to save the system for future participants. Those folks work hard. They have a right to that contract. They have a right for us to keep our promises. They have a right for that expectation. That was the job we had to make sure we could deliver on that. And those were modest changes, you're absolutely right, that were necessary and critical to survive that system. It had simply grown too burdensome, too rich, and had to have some modification.
Any follow-up?
Would you support additional reforms if elected or re-elected?
Yes, I think eventually we need to continue. We're off to a good start with these recent changes, but I think eventually we need to look at other options. We need to consider all the different pension programs that are available. Just a few days ago I met with some police officers who had some very, very serious concerns. They explained to me what their concerns were about a defined contribution plan, and that was great to hear. Perhaps we need to look at some way that we can bring about a defined contribution plan that we know what we're funding. It's done, it's taken care of, the employee leaves, it's portable, they have a lot more flexibility. However, we also need to consider the other side of that. They want their people to stay in a defined benefit plan. It typically will attract people more to want to stay. We've got to consider all the issues. Again, we need to talk with the stakeholders and make sure we are informed about our decisions before we make legislation.
Senator Pearce.
Simple answer. I think we did a great job. Again, the defined contributions that was just spoken of, looked at that, it created hundreds of millions of unfunded liability for the taxpayers in the state of Arizona to move into that. So we made good choices. I think we have a good system. And the system is recovering from already the decision we made. The systems are already moving forward and becoming much more, if you will, viable. So, you know, and they must be actuarially sound according to the Constitution. We've moved that direction. They're healing as we talk. So I'm pretty happy with what we've done.
Any more follow-up? Okay, Mr. Mursell. Start with Senator Pearce this time.
In recent years, Arizona, along with a number of other states, has attempted to pass legislation limiting the rights of public employee unions. Most recently, SB 1325 would have expressly prohibited public employee unions from applying union dues for political purposes. Now, assuming there is a role for public employee unions in Arizona, what is that role?
Well, first of all, Arizona is a right-to-work state. And so there's a balance always. I also believe you have a right to contract. And that bill did nothing to do with interfering with that ability to contract. But what it did say is the fact that there's a cost for the employer to do mandatory payroll deductions and so forth for those union members. And so that was part of the debate, is to take, we call it paycheck protection, is to fix some of that. Again, we have a balance in this state. It's just similar to another bill. And again, when you throw out a bill number, it's hard to go back and remember everything's in that bill. But what the intent was very simply is to make sure the employer has the protection also of the laws of right to work state. You know, and that there's a balance here in terms of the fact you have a right to contract, but you don't have the right to destroy or hurt a business because of their unwillingness to negotiate a union contract with somebody. Again, we're a right to work state. And so that bill was headed towards private property protection of employers' right to do business in the state of Arizona without improper, if you will, damage or influence or intimidation.
Thanks. Mr. Lewis.
Again, we need to work with labor. We need to work with management. We need to work with the government who is hiring all these government employees. We need to listen to what they're saying to us so that we understand what they need. The typical response in our legislature of recent years has been when someone wants to collaborate, wants to bring people together to discuss issues, they're branded a rhino, they're branded some kind of a name, they're castigated into something that they're really not. They want thoughtful solutions. We need to make sure that we invite labor to the table, that we invite management to the table, that we invite the government organizations to the table so that